Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. We talk about the homicide rate all of the time, but twice as many people die in this country from suicide, and it's not talked about enough. So we're going to. With licensed professional counselor Betty Jean, who is the Senior Call Center Services Coordinator for the Mental Health Association in New Jersey. Let's talk about suicide because I just saw some frightening statistics, not only that twice as many people die from suicide than homicide, but that across the country in the last 10 years, suicides have gone up 20%. And in New Jersey, they've gone up 9%. Do we know the reason for that?
The degree of despair, the degree of hopelessness that people are experiencing, the stigma yet around mental health issues, it's a significant reason for why we may be seeing people seeing suicide as an option. Statistics show that a lot of people who do die by suicide, they're dealing with depression. And part of the main symptoms of depression is isolation. People seem to isolate themselves, they want to be alone, and in being alone, the feelings of despair and hopelessness, they grow, they increase. And so that isolation really creates a place where they don't have anyone to talk to, at least in their perception.
You keep hearing, when they talk about suicides, it's always segmented. You talk about teen suicides, which is horrifying. You talk about veterans with PTSD and law enforcement officers, there's high rates of suicide. But as I look through the statistics, it seems like middle age and older people are the number one, and we don't talk about that
We
enough.
don't talk about that. Between the ages of about 24 to 54, it's the highest rates of suicide, that middle age time of year. That span of development, that's the most difficult time where people experience a lot of stressors that they feel that they should be able to manage, and everyone wants to put up the image that they're doing okay, but just life just takes a toll around that time.
I think I'm like most people, where I couldn't even imagine committing suicide because I'd hurt too many people around me. But I've never been that deep in depression where I would ever contemplate it. For those like me who don't understand, explain to me what that's like, and most importantly, what are the signs that somebody's close to that point?
Oftentimes people that are thinking suicide are so heavily depressed. They feel like they're a burden to the world. Their thinking is irrational. They're just thinking of a way of how to end the pain, not to be a burden to people, and just to get rid of the pain and the suffering that they're dealing with. And we encourage people, if you do see these signs, to respond.
Specifically, what are the signs?
Yeah, some of the signs are the person may talk about feeling helpless and hopeless, no direction. They may feel as if they're a burden. They may think about ways and express, I just want to die, and they'll say that outright. They may just begin to isolate themselves more. You may see some changes in their moods, extreme changes in their mood, and those are telltale signs that, or if they're looking for weapons or guns or speaking about weapons or guns, you want to keep those signs in mind, especially a lot of depression, isolating themselves. You want to keep those symptoms in mind. Those are warning signs.
And the reason that people don't seek professional help is because of the stigma?
A lot of times it is the stigma. People don't want to be seen as being mentally unstable, and people just really want to do the part and just wanting to function the best that they can.
Can someone like me, can just a regular person help? Is there a way that you can reach out, or do you have to say to somebody, you need to get counseling?
Well, they do need counseling, and if you notice those signs, if you do encourage them to get counseling, but if it's a friend and maybe they won't consider counseling, it's important that, number one, you reach out to your local crisis center, calling the National Suicide Lifeline. I think that's important to be able to connect people with the Lifeline. But as an individual, if there's a loved one that you see dealing with a situation, you're concerned that they might be suicidal, it's important just to ask them. It's important just to ask directly. And oftentimes people don't know, and they feel awkward about asking someone, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about harming yourself? In fear that will lead them to die by suicide or act on suicide. But studies show that that's not the reality. So number one is ask. Number two is let them know that you're present. Let them know that you're there. Three, listen to them. Sometimes asking these questions, we have to be prepared to accept what we hear. Sometimes we may feel uncomfortable hearing someone talking about their emotional distress, and we want to try to fix it and make it sound like, oh, it's not that bad. And that's not what we want to do. Part of listening and talking with people is just accept what they're saying and let them know that you're there for them. Another very important piece is to make sure there's no weapons around. No guns around where they are. Just make sure that they're safe. There's no knives around. And let them know that you want to make sure that they're safe. Connect them with a local support in their community and with family members. It might be important for you to input your phone number in their phone. When they get to that place where they in that place of despair, that they could just dial your number right away to just kind of talk if they need to at that time.
That's the recommendation you're giving to everybody.
To
Is
everyone.
that what you do on the phone? Is that what the call center does?
That's what we do at the call center. We really do kind of engage people in those conversations about death and dying.
Is it possible, if we take these steps, to prevent suicide? Are there analytics on that these can be prevented?
These steps, it will cause someone to really begin to think about the options that they have to live. Having no conversation at all, we talk about suicidal ideation, and that's just constant thinking and reflecting and planning out of suicide in someone's mind. But when we talk to somebody, we engage them on the outside of themselves to talk and really explore what the issues are, right? Because they don't really get a chance to really talk about the stress or the depression or whatever it is that's causing them to feel like they want to end their lives. But when we talk about people, we take those conversations outside of their head and we bring it in between the two of us, and we can really talk about what the options are. And yes, study that shows that the more people do talk about how they're feeling, thoughts of suicide will decrease.
If someone contemplates suicide or someone commits suicide, and I know you don't use that term anymore, but it's still in the vernacular, yeah. If somebody dies by suicide, do they necessarily immediately have mental health problems?
Most likely, we have found that most people who die by suicide, oftentimes they have been dealing with
A history of, or is it trauma?
It could be. It could be a history of mental illness. It could be a trauma. It could be an instantaneous crisis that they went through, and suicide was the option at the time.
Yeah, you need to listen, because I would think that it would be heartbreaking if someone you love was suffering from depression and it got to the point where they committed suicide, and then you look back and realize, I could have done something and I didn't do something. So
it's very important that people just don't be afraid. If you sense it, if it's a loved one, act upon it. Ask. Just ask the question. Don't wait. Don't contemplate. We have people that call the call center, the lifeline, just to ask questions about a friend because they're not sure. And our advice to them is just ask. Engage them in those conversations, because what's the worst that could happen?
sometimes people just need to know that somebody else cares.
That's all. And I think that's what we need. When we talk about suicide, when we talk about depression, people feel like they're invisible and their lives don't matter.
Wonderful.
And at the call center, we want to say that every life matters.
We have the number at the bottom, but do you want to
Yes.
say it one more time?
Yep. If you need to call the Mental Health Association or the Lifeline, our number is 1-800-273-8255.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
It was
so
a
much.
pleasure
for having
talking
me.
to
Thank
you.
you.
Betty Jean is a licensed counselor, professional counselor, and is also the Senior Call Center Services Coordinator, Mental Health Association in New Jersey. 1-800-273-8255. We're coming right back. Still to come on Jersey Matters, you'll meet the author of a unique and hot-selling children's book, and he's from New Jersey. That's next.